Mr. President, do you think that Ukraine should give up a part of its territory?
Well, we're going to see. It's a negotiation that's just starting, and they've been fighting, and there's been a lot of land that's been taken. So we'll have to see how that works out. That's part of the negotiation. I will say there was great unity in that room today. We were via Skype or whatever, but it was great, tremendous unity today in that room with the other countries. I was very impressed by it.
Territory is back. Can they take it back? What they lost in the past years?
That's not an easy thing to do, is it? Right? It's not an easy. He's asking whether or not you can take back the land that they lost, and I say that yeah, perhaps some of it. Yeah, I hope so, but that's not an easy thing to do.
But not everything.
It's going to be something we're talking about.
Will you convince Vladimir Putin to accept the European troops as peacekeeper? Will you think?
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept.
I've asked him that question.
You talked to him?
I've asked him that question.
Is France going to lift the block on the?
Because he's not. Look, if we do this deal, he's not looking for more war. He doesn't mind. But I've specifically asked him that question. He has no problem with it.
Is France going to lift the block on the $300 billion in frozen Russian assets in Belgium? France has opposed unfreezing it to pay Ukraine and compensate the U.S. for its support. Is France going to lift its opposition to that?
This is, we speak about frozen assets. We already used them to back precisely the loans negotiated at the G7. And it's part of the sanctions. So it will depend on the follow-up of the discussions. But clearly, we respect international law. It's just frozen assets now. You can take the proceeds of the frozen assets, but you cannot take the assets themselves because it's not respecting international law, and we want to respect international law.
How is one different than the other? You can take the proceeds from it, how can you not?
Because it's very different. You keep the assets, you take the proceeds because they are paralyzed in a certain way, you take the proceeds during the wartime, but you keep the assets, and it's part of the negotiation at the end of the war. Because, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia. So at the end of the day, this frozen asset should be part of the negotiation, all in all.
Will France support the U.S. being compensated?
I support the idea to have Ukraine first being compensated, because they are the one to have lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear,
okay.
We have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me. But they get their money back, and we don't, and now we do. But that's
we
only
will
fair.
fight both to do so.
So you think Russia should be the one that pays everybody back? Are they the aggressor?
Well, we're negotiating everything, and everything's on the table, and we'll see if we can get some land back, and we'll see about a lot of different things. And we're going to be making a little speech and say a few words in a little while. We're going to have another meeting, a luncheon meeting, and we'll see you in about 2 hours. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
A fascinating end to that meeting there in the Oval Office as French President Emmanuel Macron seemed to correct or clarify President Trump, characterizing how Europe is giving aid to Ukraine. But a lot of news made here, Trump saying that Russian leader Vladimir Putin would be okay with European peacekeepers in Ukraine as part of a potential deal to wind down this war. He said Putin isn't looking for more war. Words that may live in infamy, as many Putin observers believe. That's something he does want, as he may want to expand the borders of Russia. He praised Macron. He said they've had very good talks with Russia. He said they've had very good talks with others, but he didn't say Ukraine. He did, as Macron emphasized the bravery of Ukraine, Trump in turn emphasized that the U.S. is very close to this deal on rare earth minerals with Ukraine to share profits from its minerals. The Treasury Secretary there saying they're at the 1 yard line. And Trump again saying Europe does their assistance to Ukraine in the form of a loan, which was what Macron ultimately interrupted him to correct there. We should note, though, Zelenskyy said yesterday in Ukraine that he won't recognize a $500 billion share of Ukraine's deposits of rare earth and other minerals for the U.S. So he's pushing back on this Trump demand. It doesn't seem like it's at the 1 yard line when you listen to him, and Trump insisting the war could end within weeks.
And Trump even saying that Zelenskyy may come in the next week or so to sign a potential deal. All of this happening on the 3-year anniversary, of course, of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and the beginning of what we've known to be a long and bloody war. Now, he also talked about DOGE, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Obviously, emails went out to all federal employees, essentially saying to state what your accomplishments have been over this past week. It came as a surprise to a lot of federal employees, but we heard the president weigh in saying that there's a lot of genius in sending this. And if people don't respond, it's very possible there is no such person or they're not working. Obviously, we don't have any evidence that there are no such people. In fact, we know many of these people have reported to CNN receiving these emails. And of course, specific departments like the Department of Justice, for example, have instructed staff not to respond to those emails. A lot just happened. I want to bring in CNN's Jeff Zeleny, who is at the White House for us. Jeff, obviously an interesting exchange there at the end about the cost of the war, but what stood out to you from seeing those two side by side?
Well, look, that definitely is one of the headlines to come out of this. And the reason that this is important is that President Trump has long been talking about he believes the U.S. got the short end of the deal here. He believes that the U.S. was on a gravy train, in his words, during the Biden administration and has been ripped off, and saying that Europe and European countries have a loan and the U.S. has just been paying assistance to Ukraine. Extraordinary there to see the French President Emmanuel Macron in a friendly way, but it said, to be frank, that is not true. And walked through how actually European countries have much more skin in the game here, if you will. They've paid considerably more money. So that was actually a very, very interesting exchange. And you saw the American president there said, well, if you want to believe that, that's fine. And then, so I believe that we'll be hearing more about that at their news conference this afternoon. And yes, they are going to be taking questions from reporters. They're at a lunch right now, a closed-door lunch, a bilateral meeting. But that certainly was important. But the other headlines, as you said, the American president saying this war in Ukraine could be over in a matter of weeks. That might be optimistic. We shall see, of course, but important at this meeting, and no coincidence, is coming on the 3rd anniversary of the war with Ukraine. But what the French president is trying to do is use his personal relationship with Donald Trump to really bring him back on the side of the European allies and try and save the transatlantic alliance. He spent 2 hours in the Oval Office this morning on a Zoom call, if you will, with G7 leaders, wanted to be at Donald Trump's side when he was on this phone call in this Oval Office right now. So clearly what Emmanuel Macron is trying to do is pull him away just a little bit from Vladimir Putin. And this meeting is going to be bookended on Thursday with a visit here to the White House of the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.